Hey everyone, this is Cameron from Renegade Animation on renegadepopculture.com. If you like what we do, please give us a like, a follow, and a rating on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to us. We are everywhere. And also consider supporting our new Patreon. That way we can keep doing what we love, and that's talking about animation. And now, on with the show.
What's going on, guys? Welcome to another episode of Renegade Animation on the Renegade Pop Culture Podcast Network. My name is Mike. I'll be your host this evening. Joining me, as always, is the animation guru himself, Cameron.
Howdy, howdy.
And today, we have a very interesting double feature. We've got reviews for Unicorn Wars, and after a long hiatus, the Ghibli Journey is back on the road with Howl's Moving Castle. Now, we're going to start with this one first because we have some takes.
This was the movie Miyazaki made right after his award-winning, world-changing Spirited Away. This is like one of those movies like Shrek where a lot of the decision-making via the storytelling make a lot more sense when you consider when it was released. This was around like 2004. Yeah, oof, I'm feeling old. Miyazaki was very vocal, like a lot of people, about how the US went to war. Let's just say that he took the famous book of Howl's Moving Castle and used it to talk about more of his anti-war commentary and philosophy and whatnot. It's not as nuanced as Porco Rosso or Princess Mononoke. As much as I do love this film, I consider it one of his weaker films. It's still a great movie. It's just not one of the best ones he's made. Even though you can still rewatch it, and it's way better than like most of the films from that time period.
Yeah, I consider this bottom of the top as far as the hierarchy goes among many of the Studio Ghibli classics. Yeah, to get like the negative stuff out of the way first. Again, viewing this in the context of 2023, a lot of the war in the backdrop, it does kind of feel a little bit like an afterthought in terms of the overall tapestry of the film. But it's weird because in any other Miyazaki movie, something like that would have been a lot more compelling in its own right. But I don't know, just something about it here doesn't quite fit what I totally understand is like a lot of people's favorite Miyazaki movie.
A lot of Ghibli fans, from what I remember, consider it one of, at the time when it was released, before, they made Earwig and the Witch, one of the bottom three. We haven't talked about the other two yet, because there's the Goro Miyazaki Tales from Earthsea, and then Isao Takahata's Pom Poko. Like, here's the situation. We follow a young woman named Sophie, who is voiced by Emily Mortimer, and she encounters Howl one day, voiced by Christian Bale. That evening, on that same day, Sophie encounters the Witch of the Waste, voiced by Lauren Bacall, and due to, pettiness, the Witch of the Waste transforms Sophie from a young lady to an old woman. Sophie, who's now old and voiced by Gene Simmons.
This is not to be confused with the lead singer of Kiss.
She goes on a journey to the countryside to find Howl's Moving Castle, and she does. And along the way, she meets a fire demon named Calcifer, voiced by Billy Crystal, and a young boy named Markle, voiced by Josh Hutcherson. And right there, this is what the movie should be about. This journey, themes of self-love and courage, and like not running away or trying to hide away from your emotions. Kind of like what we saw in Song of the Sea with the Owl Witch.
Mm-hmm.
Anytime she felt sad, she would hide her emotions in a jar. And here with Howl, something happened to him, and it was told by his old teacher, Madame Sullivan, voiced by Blythe Danner, that he had his heart stolen by a demon. And we'll find out about that later when we talk about it. But this is not really the main story. It's part of the main story. The other side is that there's a war going on between two kingdoms, and one of the kingdoms' prince goes missing. And we'll talk about that soon. It's not like this comes out of nowhere. They set up a few of these little details at the very beginning, like when Sophie leaves for the first time. Or maybe it's when Sophie leaves when she's Grandma Sophie. And you hear these three guys in the background say, like, yeah, the other kingdom's prince is missing. They're going to go to war because of it. Anytime the movie has to grind to a halt to talk about how bad war is, it stops the movie in its tracks. And even for like a 2-hour movie, it feels much longer because of every time they go back to a war setting, seeing the planes, talking about how wizards made allegiances with the kingdoms to become monsters, and how bad that is, and how Howl's a tortured soul. It just doesn't help with the story, because every other time when the story is focusing on Sophie, Markle, Calcifer, Howl, and the mysterious turnip head scarecrow, it's great. It's all that Ghibli stuff that you love. And something tells me that, and this is just a guess, I'm not saying this is official, Miyazaki pushed the war into the foreground when it was meant to be in the background. Because there are like moments and scenes that kind of feel like, look at all these people having to deal with the consequences of these two kingdoms going to war with one another. But I'm not sure. It just feels like, because he was so fed up with how the war was going on in the other side of the world, that he's just like, I'm just going to focus on this more. And then it sacrifices the story.
I'm kind of curious, like, to actually go back and read this novel to see how much of the war is like as much of a presence in the source material, because considering when this film was released, it does feel more topical than really anything he's done before and then after.
It's not like he's never been anti-war. A lot of his films are anti-war. Castle in the Sky, Nausicaa, Porco Rosso, Princess Mononoke. There's even like a little scrap of a war situation going on with Ponyo. And then, Goro Miyazaki's adaptation of Tales from Earthsea. It's not like Studio Ghibli and Miyazaki have never made it known that they do not like war.
They've made that pretty clear.
It's just the fact that it feels like it doesn't fit into the rest of the movie. When there's magic and whimsy, one of the cool things about this movie is how they portray magic. I love how the Witch of the Waste curses Sophie just by flying through her, or how Hal removes a curse that was scorched onto the table by just rubbing his hand over it. And doing like all these other little magic tricks and such, or like Markle's old man disguise, how he just pulls a hood over himself and then his hands over his face, and then a huge beard comes out.
And then there's Calcifer, who, that dude's a little spitfire.
Yeah, Calcifer, voiced by Billy Crystal. Throughout the story, you find out that Calcifer and Howl are connected in some way. You put out Calcifer, Howl dies. You can already tell, like, if you look closely at some of the things, telltale signs of Calcifer's connection to Howl. Like when Howl picks him up later after Sophie goes on a cleaning spree, you can almost see that Calcifer beats like a heart. You think he's just kind of like a piece of coal or something. And then he's put back in the fireplace where he should stay. And I love Billy Crystal as Calcifer. Calcifer is a super charming character, very likable. So before we get into more, though, what do you like about this movie? Because I think we've both agreed that the wartime stuff is the weakest overall downside to the film.
The stuff that I love about this movie is the found family element, where it even kind of reminds me of Beauty and the Beast a little bit, where Sophie is kind of the stand-in for Belle, and everyone else in the castle to a lesser extent because there's not as many people living there, but she comes in and sort of changes everyone who lives there, even to the point that like she actually starts to like have a bond with Calcifer. One of the things that Howl notices when he first steps in after Sophie's been there for a minute, like, oh, you're acting obedient. Because before that, Calcifer's like, I don't listen to anyone except for Howl. And then later we find out the reason why.
I mean, I do like that aspect, even though these aren't my favorite batch of Ghibli characters. Like, I think Markle's fine. I really love Turnip Head just because of the design, and I love the little cracks that Sophie takes at him when you first meet him. And I love his introduction when Sophie pulls up the pole and you see him standing high and tall, and then Sophie's just like, oh, look, a scarecrow. Your head's a turnip. I have always hated turnips, even when I was little. And this movie could be very funny in a lot of ways. Like, I love when Sophie's going to meet Madame Solomon, and she's trying to figure out what Howl's disguise is. And she's just like, he can't be a crow. Nah, he can't be a dove either. He's too flamboyant. And then he sees like a soldier fly away with a woman on one of those cool little plane-like things. And she's just like, that could be him. Just like stone cold. Like, what's kind of fun about the chemistry and dynamic between Howl and Sophie is that Sophie is very self-assured, maybe a little self-conscious about who she is, but she takes no flack from Howl, except for one moment where Howl has a freak out because Sophie changed the potions in the bathroom and caused his hair to turn orange and then black. And
there's a reason why that scene in particular made me laugh. It's because both of my brothers are redheads. So when he says like, oh, my hair, it's hideous, I'm like, what, you got a problem with gingers?
And then there's that scene where he's like bringing in all the darkness and emo angst. And then Marco's just like, oh, wow, I've seen him do this before when a girl dumped him. There are just these great moments where they're just living life. Or like when Turnip Head shows up again and does the laundry with them. And Sophie has that moment of just like, yeah, Turnip Head's probably a demon, but he brought me here, so he must be one of the good ones. Like, I love little moments like that. Or later on when Howl shows Sophie his old study getaway and the romance builds up with Howl and Sophie. And that's kind of the problem with the movie. It's not just that the war parts cause the film to grind to a halt. It takes away more time that we could have spent with these characters, these interactions and such.
You're not wrong. I was kind of struggling a bit with my own review of this because the sum of its parts are all great. It's just they don't quite gel together the way some of Miyazaki's earlier films do or some of his later ones. But I also kind of understand that this came out at like a very particular time in world history. So that's not to excuse any flaws. It's more of an understanding.
Because there's like that one moment after Hal's freak out where Sophie's just like, so what, you have bad hair? I've never been pretty in my whole life. Runs outside and cries in the rain. And then Turnip Head comes back and with a umbrella and such. And then it's like, okay, that drama's over. Okay, that took like 2 minutes to solve. And then there are just moments where it's like, Markle doesn't want Sophie to leave, and they could have been so much stronger with these connections and such, but they just aren't there, so the payoffs aren't really there. Even what happens with Turnip Head feels very last minute, just the way how the character expositions what happened to him, his whole backstory. Because as we find out, like, around the second half of the film, Madame Solomon asked Howl and the Witch of the Waste to get to her castle. And you find out that she only invited them to take their power, to make them powerless. And then ends up with Turnip Head, Madame Solomon's dog, Keen, which I love that little dog design. The Witch of the Waste now as like a very, very old lady, now living with Howl and the crew. And there's just no time for that to set in. And it's a shame. Miyazaki's strengths are with his characters and how he makes you feel like you're lived in that world. And it's just not fully there when you get to those moments. It's like they had to force in more war is bad. Oh, yeah, this is terrible. Bleh. And that sucks. Because then you get into stuff like you find out that Calcifer was the demon that stole Howl's heart because he was one of those like shooting star demons. And by the way, those shooting star demons or whatever they are, so cool. Love their designs. Love that little moment where Solomon traps Howl with them. And then the whole moment where, like, and the internet loves this theory that when Sophie sees Howl in the past, she's just like, come find me. My name's Sophie. And then at the beginning of the movie, when she's getting harassed by these two guards who are super creepy.
Very, yeah.
And then you see Howl like, there you are. I've been looking everywhere for you. They think there's like this time loop of she found him in the past and then he found her in the future. Even though I'm like, that doesn't fully make sense, but in a romantic way, I love that.
Same.
Like, I'm a sucker for that kind of stuff. But again, not a whole lot of time spent on the actual romance between Howl and Sophie, which that kind of matters when they're the main love interest for one another. Even Howl, at points, understandably because of his character, is disconnected with how he interacts with Sophie and everyone. He's like, okay, I'm just going to protect y'all, bye. And I get it. He like put his emotions and his metaphorical and literal heart into Calcifer. So he doesn't have to feel that. That's why he's so kind of like one note level of tone and mood with everyone. Even though he still has outbursts of energy and character.
By the way, can we talk about how perfect Christian Bale is as this character?
I was kind of interested in seeing how I would feel because I used to watch this movie all the time. It used to be my favorite Ghibli movie before I realized that I loved Porco Rosso the most. Christian Bale doesn't do a lot of voice work. It's basically Pocahontas as Thomas and then weird mocap version of Jungle Book that
Andy Serkis
made. That was it. I thought he did a good job. I mean, maybe he could have used a little more emotion when Howl was freaking out. But everywhere else, loved it.
And he got to use a little bit of his Batman voice when he was kind of fully in his demon form.
The voice cast is pretty good. You have, like we said, we got Christian Bale, John Simmons, Emily Mortimer, Josh Hutcherson, Billy Crystal, Lauren Bacall, Blythe Danner, Mary Devon plays Sophie's mom, Letty, who plays Sophie's sister, played by Jenna Malone. The King character, which I love the King's design. I thought that was a general for the longest time. But then hearing the mannerisms of just like, hello, my liege. And it's like, oh, okay. He's voiced by Mark Silverman. Turnip Head, when you find out that he was the prince from long time ago who was cursed, is voiced by Crispin Freeman. It's a good cast, and it's not like the war stuff isn't all pointless or frustrating to go through. I love when Honey comes back to the house at the beginning of the movie, and she has that big, like, rimmed hat with the cannon sticking out. There's, like, these little moments where they throw in, like, environmental storytelling of, like, war propaganda and such. It's not just the big moments where they have all the soldiers marching or the ships and tanks leaving and what have you. Like, it's all there. But if I had to say one thing that I love universally, it's the soundtrack.
Of course. Joe Hisaishi is honestly one of the best composers that we've had over the past, I want to say he's been working for like minimum 40 years, if not more.
He's so good at what he does. And that piano theme that opens the movie is probably like the most popular piece of Ghibli music ever. Maybe outside of the theme to Spirited Away and the ending theme to Castle in the Sky. You can just type in Howl's Moving Castle theme, and there are like people who played on the violin, the piano, remixes, longer versions of it. It's so popular. We all know why. It's beautiful music. I love the soundtrack when Howl is taking Sophie to the bakery, how it just rises and feel the magic and wonder of this world before you're dragged back down into boring war talk. And of course, since it's Ghibli, the animation is amazing. Their use of 2D mixed with CGI is quite unmatched, only because they sparingly use CGI.
They only really use it for, well, the castle, obviously, but a few warship during some of the dogfight scenes. And other than that, it's mostly that traditional animation that we all know and love.
And I love like the detail of how Sophie goes from old lady Sophie to normal Sophie when she gains her confidence back. And then she goes back to old lady when she loses it. And I do love the ending where Calcifer comes back and Howl's just like, it's like, Sophie, you're okay. Oh man, my heart, it hurts. And just like the emotional themes there. And I love seeing the castle fly in the end. And you see that sequence of Howl kissing Sophie covered by the hat. It just feels like there's a lot of wasted opportunity with this movie. When it hits, it hits. When it doesn't, it's so disappointing sitting there. Even though I'll still watch this movie all the time. It's Ghibli, I will rewatch all of their films. I would say I consider this one more in the middle of Ghibli's filmography. It's really good, but not as great as Ghibli's best movies are.
I feel like where it's at in my list right now is closer to the bottom, but I still have like a little bit less than half of the rest of Studio Ghibli to go. So probably by the end of this journey, it'll probably sit comfortably in the middle for me as well.
Like, it's a good movie, and considering what else came out in 2004, and I guess 2005 in the US, it's lovely stuff. I just wish Miyazaki did a better job with it. Like, if we're counting where it is in terms of like animated films that came out in 2004, I think we got it in 2005 because that was when it was nominated alongside Wallace and Gromit, Curse of the Were-Rabbit, and Corpse Bride. But it just feels like a slight disappointment compared to the amazing Spirited Away.
Yeah, that I can agree with. But to be fair, Spirited Away is one tough act to follow. So we have set our piece on this movie, but no matter what, following anything after Spirited Away, it's not an easy feat.
It's not, and that sucks that we all like talk about stuff like that because it's still a good movie. It's just not as good as the other good stuff they make. But I still recommend it. I still watch it. I still own it on Blu-ray. I want to buy the art book for it. But I think now it's time to spin the wheel. Wouldn't you say?
Yeah. Give that thing a spin.
Alrighty, let me see. All right, Studio Ghibli, where are we going next? Ooh. Is that a good emotion? Is that a bad emotion? Is that a bad ooh or a good ooh? Because we are going to 2010 with the first film by one of the few Ghibli filmmakers that were able to make more than one Ghibli movie that wasn't Miyazaki and such. Because we are talking about Hiromasa Yonebayashi's The Secret World of Arrietty.
Ooh.
this is their take on The Borrowers, which I don't know if anyone remembers those books, but yeah. It was directed by Hiromasa Yonebayashi, and Miyazaki wrote the screenplay along with Keiko Niwa. This one's going to be an interesting one to return to. I don't know when we're going to get to it, but we'll try to get to it soon because there's just a lot to talk about with this one, including the fact that it has two different voice casts. And that's interesting to me. We'll get there when we need to, so.
One thing I just want to say really quick, and one of the reasons I'm excited to cover this one, I remember seeing the trailer for this in front of, it was either the Muppet movie or Wreck-It Ralph. I saw the trailer for The Secret World of Arrietty, and this was before I really knew about Studio Ghibli outside of, I was just kind of excited to see more from that studio, and I'm excited I finally get to check this one out.
Yeah, this is going to be one of those ones where people kind of put it in the middle of Ghibli's filmography. But there's still a lot of cool stuff. But man, is this one going to be kind of wild to talk about. But for now, we got to talk about a film that's going to split people down the middle. Not in a literal sense, but a metaphorical sense. And not in a good kind of like split down the middle, like you're laughing or something. No, that's not it at all. Because we are talking about Unicorn Wars, the new film by Alberto Vázquez, who did 2015's Bird Boy, The Forgotten Children, which was released in the US in 2017. The whole story revolves around a village of teddy bears that are trained to fight in a war against the unicorns. And, well, despite the cute nature and sound of this premise, it's anything but cute. Because we do follow two main characters, Azuline and Gordy, who are brothers. And so, Mike, you watched both of his feature films recently. This director is a lot, isn't he?
To put it lightly, yeah, he is. I am kind of questioning if he's okay, given the subject matter of both Bird Boy and Unicorn Wars. We are going to have to issue a content warning because...
Multiple.
Yeah, content warning for content warnings.
Yeah, so there's a lot of gore, violence, religious zealotry, military stuff, a bit of right-wing imagery. And no, this isn't like right-wing propaganda or anything like that. This guy has no time to mess around with those knuckleheads. There's also suicide, drug abuse, I think a little homophobia.
Just a touch.
There's a little fat phobia also, and it's just a really intense movie that you have to be in the mood for. And that sounds silly, right? Unicorn Wars, a war between teddy bears and unicorns. That sounds like the most Care Bear thing ever. And the director, who I got to see at Animation is Film, was talking about how he used the imagery of unicorns and teddy bears as a means of just like to shock the audience of like things, visuals that are deemed childlike and innocent thrown into the deep end. There's just a lot to take away from his movies. Like his first film with Bird Boy, there's like dealing with personal demons, disruptive families, drug abuse, murder, cults. And a lot of that same stuff is here with Unicorn Wars. The only difference is Unicorn Wars does not have the light at the end of the tunnel ending that Bird Boy had. Because Bird Boy ends on a downer note of just everyone in that movie stuck where they are. Bird Boy is dead. But the main character of the film finds promise and optimism in dark times. Here, you might as well see like a unicorn stab the Bird Boy Blu-ray right through it. Be like, we are not that optimistic about the world right now.
There's a little bit of a trade-off between the two movies. Like Bird Boy's visual aesthetic is a bit more darker. There's a lot more red and black in its color palette.
It's very drab.
Yeah. This is like the opposite, where it's very colorful, but that aesthetic is like in direct contrast with heavy themes throughout.
The color palette for Unicorn Wars is like bright, garish neon pinks, blues, yellows, browns, grays, all there in like these beautiful, lush forest background areas. I guess there is a little disconnect of how bright the visuals are compared to like how gory and violent everything gets. But that's kind of the point. A lot of this film's story is how one can be raised with love and the other is raised with hate. Like the one brother was more close to his mom and like wants peace and love and all this senseless violence to stop. While the other, he's off the deep end. He is violent, hateful, jealous, spiteful, all because of how he viewed what you find out was a divorce. Like, it's a very interesting perspective to go on because we see what happens with the one brother who befriends a unicorn, while the brother, it's funny how much we can compare him to Bellows from the Owl House in some regards.
Oh my God, you're right.
Because at one point he gets like gored by the unicorns and his face gets wrecked. But the military and religious zealots that run this little town and the base that the bears are training in, like use him as an icon, a mascot of to kill the unicorns. There's a reason why the unicorns to the bears are these like shadowy, mysterious figures when that's what they look like in the eyes of the bears. There's like that one line from Silent Hill 3 where the main character is talking to another character and she's like, don't you see those monsters out there? And the guy goes, what? You see them as monsters? And it's like, oh no. But that's how the bears have been told and taught through religious and military extremisms how to view the unicorns, even though in the history, it turns out that the bears more in the wrong than the unicorns.
You know what this whole inciting incident reminds me of? It reminds me of the song Savages from Pocahontas. Each of the opposing sides view each other as the enemy, and I think this movie does a great job of like kind of letting us see the perspective of both sides almost equally.
The problem with Savages from Pocahontas is that it paints that both sides were at fault when it's like, no, 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 no.
Historically, that song is complete BS, but
I know what you're saying. It's just that song ages badly to me. But I get it. It's just like both sides see each other as the monster, as the dark side of the life. But it definitely paints a more terrible image on the bears. But even then, at the end of the movie, it doesn't really matter.
Because nobody wins.
Yeah, so like, this movie is really depressing and intense, but it can also be kind of funny, and that really sets you up with how scary a lot of this can be. Because like some parts are very funny, and then like you see little drops in details of the bears. Like they're very vain and like, oh, I'm so gorgeous and amazing looking. I can look the cutest. And then you just see as time goes on how the one brother is willing to kill and even content warning, cannibalize his fellow bear just to survive.
That scene was probably one of the hardest to watch. The one that was, I think, the most creative in terms of this is something that could only have been accomplished in animation is the drug trip scene. As we kind of talked off air, I am glad that I watched that sober because I don't know how I would have reacted to that under the influence.
I don't drink and I don't really do drugs. So watching that scene is still really uncomfortable. It's a lot. And it leads to two of the characters' deaths. And it's nonstop. You want there to be a break from all of this hate and violence. But it just keeps escalating, even to the point where the brother who was filled with hate and rage takes out the people he worked under to be the leader right at the very end. Even though you feel like, oh, the brother's going to come in and save the day and tell him, like, we got to stop this senseless violence. No. 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 Spoilers. Both of the brothers die and all the unicorns die. I think, like, no one is left alive in this world after the war happens. I think all the bears are dead. I think all the unicorns are dead. And then when you think that's just like, oh, that's super depressing, you think that's like the end. It's not. It's absolutely not, because basically the movie ends with like all the bodies and blood and guts of the unicorns and the bears combined into a single entity. Man. And that's how the movie ends.
That ending is, I don't think I even have words for the way this movie ends. It's just so, it's not an uplifting ending the way Bird Boys was, even to like a minor extent, but I don't like to use the term grimdark to describe most media, but this movie is like the perfect definition of grimdark.
I would have just said nihilistic, because it's mostly just how man is the most destructive. I mean, it sounds so cliche when you say it out loud. Man is the most destructive nature in the world. And it is. It's true. We suck. It's just all about how these extremist views, like these upbringings, can lead to someone being destructive. Like, it's a very complex film. But there's also a reason why my screening of it at Animation is Film was full of people just Wyatt in a very like WTF way. And then just kind of like, okay, we're going to clap, but that was a lot.
I would say, like, from an artistic perspective, this movie is the dictionary definition of art. This is like, the production is top shelf. The animation is gorgeous. The vocal performances are great. The music even is well done. But I do not blame you for not wanting to see this for any of the reasons that we described.
I can see people either loving this or really hating it. I know a few critics who watched it at Fantastic Fest, and it was like, I don't think I like that. That was a lot. Oh my gosh. And I get it. Like, he is aggressive in that way. He's like, I'm going to tell my story and like my viewpoint, my stories, and there's nothing you can do about it. And that could be great, but it's just a lot. But in this film's entire defense, if you think this film is pointless, that's incorrect. Because we keep having this debate about how people online use the whole animation as cinema argument, and how a lot of people who snipe back at it are like, well, can you choose other movies that aren't family films or ones that were successful? And it's like, I can, you can. I've introduced you to like so many movies that can be used that aren't just like the Mitchells versus the Machines and all that. For those people who are saying like, well, why does it have to be something other than that, because that's how animation is. If you believe in Guillermo del Toro's animation as film comments, then that means you have to choose films that are going to be like this: experimental, dark, adult, not really happy or optimistic.
And not only that, but I think it's a healthy media landscape, especially for animation, is that there's room at the table for every type of movie. You can sit a Unicorn Wars in the same table as, like you said, the Mitchells versus the Machines, or Watership Down, or any one of the Studio Ghibli films, or the list goes on. But my point is, if you're going to say animation is cinema, you can't say that with a narrow point of view. You have to take the entire landscape into account.
Exactly. And the landscape isn't going to be pretty. There's a lot of mess. There's a lot of schlock, a lot of terrible films, a lot of great films, and a lot of amazing films that tackle all these different topics. And sometimes you're just going to find a film like this, or Waltz with Bashir, or Charlotte. That's why I say I do recommend it. If you are down for watching something different, give this film a watch. It's out on demand right now, but a Blu-ray is coming out in May. But yeah, that's all I have to say about this. It's just a wild movie, a stressful movie, but a very interesting movie that deserves to be talked about.
Basically, to paraphrase what I said in my own Letterboxd review, if you were a fan of Vázquez's previous film, Bird Boy, then this is almost an easy recommendation. But if you're going into this blind, make sure you understand what you're getting into. And should you seek this out, I am very curious to know what you think, because, like, as we described, it's not an easy watch, but it is one that warrants discussion.
Exactly. Just give it a watch, see what you think. If you feel like you need to slowly get into the deep end with this film, watch Alberto's previous film, Bird Boy, like on Shudder right now, or AMC Plus, which has Shudder. Prepare yourself, because there's not a movie quite like it.
No, there isn't.
And with that, we are done for this episode. Next time, we will be talking about the long-awaited, highly anticipated Suzume from Makoto Shinkai.
We may or may not have a guest joining us, one who has become a familiar face on the podcast, but more on that later. Until next time, Cameron, where can everyone find you online?
You can find me on Twitter at Cam's Eye View. I have a website called camseyeview.biz where I review animated films and shows from around the world called The Other Side of Animation. I also have a Patreon at patreon.com/camseyeview. That's where you can find me.
And you guys can find me on Twitter at CaptainK42. You can check out my quick thoughts on letterboxd.com/CoachK42. And you can follow Renegade Pop Culture on Facebook and Twitter at RenPopCulture. You can also find us on YouTube, on Podchaser, subscribe to our Patreon at patreon.com/Renegade Pop Culture. Listen to all of our podcasts on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you listen. And last but not least, everything can be found at renegadepopculture.com. Need an escape? So do we. That'll do it for this episode of Renegade Animation. We will catch you guys later. Peace out.